I have been trying to figure out how to tell this story for 3 months. Not because it is complicated. It is, in many ways, the simplest story I have ever lived through. But because simple things are sometimes the hardest to put into words without losing what makes them what they are. Without the language shrinking the experience into something smaller than it actually was. So I am going to try. And I am going to ask you to bring whatever patience you have and whatever love you carry for the people in your life, because I think, by the end of this, you will want to call someone. Or hug someone. Or simply sit with the knowledge that the people who love you may be seeing you more clearly than you know. My name is Susan. I am 53 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, in the same house I have lived in for 18 years. The house I moved into when my marriage ended and I needed something stable and affordable and mine. A small house. A good house. The kind that fills up with the life you pour into it regardless of its size. I have one son. His name is Marcus. He is 23 years old and he graduated from Ohio State University 3 months ago with a degree in engineering and a grade point average that I will not quote here because he would be embarrassed, but which made me sit in that auditorium on a May afternoon and cry in a way that soaked entirely through the paper program I was holding. On the evening of his graduation, at a dinner I had organized at the restaurant he had chosen, with a small gathering of people who loved him, my son stood up. And he said something. And I want to tell you what it was. But first I need to tell you what it cost me to get there. Not for sympathy. Not to set up a dramatic contrast. But because his words only meant what they meant because of the years that preceded them. And for them to mean what they meant to you, you need to know those years too. Marcus's father and I divorced when Marcus was 7 years old. I will not speak about the marriage at length. It is not that story. What I will say is that it ended, as some things end, in a way that was necessary even if it was painful. And that the person who felt the practical weight of the ending most immediately was me. Not from self-pity. I made my choices and I navigated the consequences of them. But the practical reality of a 30-year-old woman with a 7-year-old son and a house payment and a job that paid enough to get by but not enough to breathe is a specific kind of difficult that I want to name rather than gloss over. I worked as a dental office manager. Good, steady work, but not work that pays for private school or vacations abroad or the kind of childhood that children in the movies seem to have. I worked. I managed. I stretched every dollar with the quiet arithmetic of someone who has become very good at making things work because making things work is not optional. I took a second job when Marcus was 10. 2 evenings a week and Saturday mornings, I worked at a bookstore in the mall. Not a prestigious job. But I loved it, the particular quiet of a bookstore, the weight of books in your hands, the occasional customer who came in looking for something specific and left with something better. And the income made the difference between managing and managing with a small cushion, which is its own kind of luxury when you have been without one. Marcus grew up watching me work. I want to say that plainly because it is the truth and because children see more than we give them credit for. He saw me leave in the morning before he was fully awake and come home in the evening after he had started his homework. He saw me at the kitchen table on Sunday evenings organizing the week's finances with the careful attention of someone who cannot afford a mistake. He saw me say no to things, to the school trip, to the new video game, to the restaurant that was a little too expensive, with the practiced ease of a parent who has made saying no into something that sounds almost like abundance. I thought I was hiding the difficulty from him. I was not. But I did not know that then. What I knew then was that Marcus was a good boy who became, without my fully noticing the transition, a good young man. He was quiet in a way that sometimes worried me. The quietness of someone who is thinking more than he is saying. But his teacher spoke well of him and his friends were decent people and he came home at reasonable hours and, after we had established the routine of it, he made dinner on Tuesday and Thursday nights so that I could go straight to the bookstore without stopping to cook. He started that at 12. Not because I asked. Because he noticed that on those evenings, I was tired before I even got home, and that having to cook on top of everything else made the evening harder than it needed to be. He was 12. I think about that often. He saw me. He had always been seeing me. I just didn't know it yet. Marcus was not an easy teenager in all the ways that teenagers are not easy. He was moody in the way of adolescent boys, the particular weather of a person navigating the transition between what they were and what they are becoming, unpredictable and sometimes exhausting and entirely normal even when it doesn't feel normal from inside it. There were arguments. Not many, but real ones. About curfews, about grades that slipped in his sophomore year when something shifted in him that I watched with concern and couldn't quite reach, about the particular teenage quality of behaving as if your parents' love is an intrusion rather than a gift. I held my ground on the things that mattered. I let go of the things that didn't. I tried to be the kind of parent who was both firm and warm, who set real expectations while making it clear that my love was not conditional on his meeting them. I was not perfect at this. No one is. But I showed up. Every day. Without keeping score. His junior year, something changed. I am not entirely sure what, perhaps the turning of something internal, the way adolescence eventually resolves into a direction even if it reaches that direction through considerable turbulence. But Marcus became, in his junior year, more present. More communicative. He started asking me questions about my life, about what I wanted, what I had wanted when I was his age, what I had given up or not given up. Questions that surprised me with their specificity. Questions that suggested he had been thinking about me as a person rather than simply as his mother. He got into Ohio State his senior year. Early admission. Engineering, he had always been drawn to how things were built, how structures worked, the logic of load-bearing and design. When the letter arrived, he handed it to me without saying anything. I read it standing at the kitchen counter. And I said, "Marcus." And he said, "I know, Mom." And we stood there for a moment with the letter between us. And then he put his arms around me. Not a teenager's hug, the quick, enduring hug of someone who has not quite decided that physical affection is allowed. A real hug. The kind that holds on. I held on back. For longer than either of us acknowledged afterward. The 4 years at Ohio State were their own kind of adjustment. I was, for the first time in 16 years, in a house that was quiet by default. I had built so much of my daily rhythm around Marcus, the meals, the conversations, the particular presence of another person in the space, that his absence required a genuine reconstruction of ordinary life. I did it. Slowly. With more grace than I expected. But I missed him. Consistently, deeply, in the particular way that parents miss children who have grown into people they genuinely like. He called twice a week. Sometimes more. He came home for holidays and some weekends and, in his junior year, for the surgery I had on my knee that I had told him was minor and which was not entirely minor and which he came home for anyway because he had called the doctor's office himself to get the actual information. He was 20. He called the doctor's office himself. I found out afterward. I was simultaneously annoyed and moved beyond words. That was Marcus. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. It was warm, that specific Ohio May warmth that is never entirely predictable, warm enough for the dress I had bought for the occasion but with a breeze that kept it from being uncomfortable. I sat in the auditorium with my sister Carol and my friend Judith and Marcus's best friend's parents, and I watched 17,000 people receive their degrees with the particular combination of pride and absurdity that these ceremonies always produce. And then his name was called. Marcus Allen Webb. He walked across the stage. He shook the dean's hand. He held his diploma up and looked out at the crowd with an expression that was trying to be composed and was not quite managing it, which was, for Marcus, who was generally composed, entirely extraordinary. I was on my feet before I understood I was standing. I was crying before I understood I was crying. Carol had her arm around me by the time Marcus had walked off the stage. "You did that," she said. "That is yours." I shook my head. I was trying to say something about how it was his, not mine, how he had earned it. But I could not get the words out. Later I understood what Carol had meant. Not that the degree was mine, but that the person holding it, the young man who had called the doctor's office and made dinner on Tuesday evenings and held on in that hug, was shaped, in part, by the years I had spent shaping him. That was mine. That was what I had built. We went to dinner that evening at a restaurant Marcus had chosen, a nice one, nicer than we would normally have chosen, but this was the night for it. Part number 2.